Let's look at inflation in a way you've never seen before, and if you don't act, the deleterious ways that inflation affects your personal finances that you've never thought about before. And we will get graphic, meaning that I've got great graphs today showing the level of your dollar destruction, and one graph is really hard to stop looking at. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold, Get Rich Education founder, Forbes Real Estate Council member, best-selling author, and longtime real estate investor. Inflation has widened the divide between the affluent and the deprived, and that has gone from a gully to a canyon. But my gosh, look at this. We've already seen more inflation in just the first 51 months of the 2020s decade than in the entire decade of the 2010s. The dark blue line is our current decade, hat tip to Resi Club here. The 90s decade, the orange line, saw 33.7% cumulative inflation, mostly Bill Clinton years. The 2000s decade, red line, 28.8% inflation, that was mostly George W. Bush. And by the way, presidents can't totally take the credit or blame for these phenomena. There are lag factors from previous administrations and other influences. The 2010s decade up 19%, the Obama years.
I have no more campaigns to run. My only agenda, I know because I won both of them.
Obama with the flex there. In the 2020s decade, the current one, 20.7% under Trump and Biden, and largely as a reaction to the pandemic.
The energy is what caused this massive inflation that we've suffered through. And then everything caught on. I mean, do you ever see bacon where it went up four times over a course of 3 years? So I don't eat bacon anymore. It's too expensive.
But here's the thing, this 20% plus is in just the first 51 months of this young decade, if we start counting from 2020. And it's not just your Trader Joe's bill and your Costco bill that hits you in the face every week. It's the price of homes, rent, utilities, transportation, labor, almost every facet of your life. And I've got something mind-blowing for you here. Inflation over the next 40 years could make the last 40 seem like a picnic, because if the last 40 years repeats itself by the year 2064, which is in the next 40 years, we will see these prices. Gas at $13.38 per gallon. The home price at $1.88 million, just the average home. Average rent at $59,000 per year, and an average salary at $104,000. That's all based on CPI data from the BLS. That's how the picture would look in 40 years. And note how salaries don't keep pace with prices. And this is all really frustrating. One reason inflation is expected to continue is partly because we're $35 trillion in debt, and that now grows by another $1 trillion every 90 days. So we've got to keep dollar printing in order to pay it back. And here's the real problem. Ultimately, real capital is scarce. We're talking about your time and your energy. They are scarce. Well, money ought to reflect that if it's going to accurately convey the value that enables you to make capital accumulation decisions, and the dollar is not remotely scarce. So the middle class and the poor, they often have wages that don't track inflation during inflationary periods, yet they're the ones that suffer disproportionately from the higher consumer prices. The investor class, they own assets that float up with inflation, and this channel's followers will do even better, because as income property owners with mortgages, we are winning 3 ways at the same time with the inflation triple crown. So now that we've looked at this by decade, what's the more current inflation situation? Well, take a look. In trying to quiet it down to 2%, the Fed has run into so many hurdles that you'd think that they were training for this summer's Olympics in Paris. It's bouncing near 3.5% really for a year now. And is this turning into Jerome Powell's 3-quarter life crisis here? Rising inflation is one of the key factors, in fact, that brought down the Roman Empire. They famously experienced hyperinflation after a series of emperors lowered the silver content of their currency, called the denarius. And today here in the United States, some lament that the dollar isn't backed by gold or silver, which is true, or anything else, which is not true, because the dollar actually is backed by some things. It's backed by the world's most powerful military, the strongest economy in the world, reserve currency status, international trade agreements, and you also must pay your taxes in dollars. But yet at the same time, we're also the greatest debtor nation in world history. And the easiest way for us to pay back all of our debt as a nation is to simply print more and inflate more. So it's inevitable that dollars will keep being worth less. Which, by the way, those two words, worth less, look awfully close to the word worthless if we make it one word, which is where the dollar is headed. Well, until we can send a Venmo request to the Fed to compensate us for our loss in purchasing power, we do need to actually do something about this for ourselves. Because the dollar that you had when you started watching this video, that might only be worth 99 cents already. So we can either have our standard of living degraded by inflation, or we can profit from it. And when you have mortgage loans, since you're borrowing large lumps of money, inflation affects you more than it does other people. Because if you make a, say, $100K down payment on a $500K property, well, that $400K of your borrowed money will get easier for you to pay back if inflation goes high, because your salary or wage or rent income, that tends to float up with inflation over time. But if you borrowed that $400K and then just say inflation stopped and went to zero, well, it's not as easy to pay back as it would be if inflation were higher. And before I leave you with an actionable video on what you can do about this, hey, the father of Reaganomics will be here on the channel with us soon. Yes, President Ronald Reagan's budget director will soon be here with me. If you want to be sure to see that, subscribe to the channel. And a lot of people don't know this. You need to click that little notification bell next to the subscribe to be notified, or else you'll miss the next video. As for now, if you haven't yet, and this is foundational, learn how to win 3 ways at the same time with the inflation triple crown. Watch the first video in that series and learn how you can turn all this inflation around and start profiting from it by owning income property with a loan. You can see that right here.